folks. Fall and winter need their own wardrobe full of comfortable, coordinating pieces for a layered look with perspective. You need warmth that is still extra breathable. Did you actually know that you sweat more often if you're wearing coats in the winter than you do in the summer? But you don't notice it because you're all bundled up.
No, I notice it when I take my shirt off after I get home from overdressing on the for the long walk.
Yeah, well, Matt notices it, but you may not, and you would notice it less, and you wouldn't have all that sweaty crap that he has to deal with if you had breathable clothing from Rhone. Starchy, stiff workwear is not optimal when you need to endure your busiest, most important days. With our commuter collection, your clothing looks professional, performs like activewear, and feels like total comfort. Wanting to look good without having to think about it, a layerable, durable, refined wardrobe that's easy and has style and exudes confidence effortlessly in a wide range of social and professional events is perfect for you. The frustration of trying to keep up with ever-changing trends, the confusion and the nuances in men's fashion, sport coat versus blazer, for example, you don't have to worry about that hassle or the hassle of frequent dry cleaning and washing, only for clothes to shrink and fade. Rhone solves all of that with its commuter collection, the most comfortable, breathable, truly versatile set of products known to man. Rhone has premium pieces to elevate every occasion. Pants, dress shirts, quarter zips, polos, blazers, all boosted with functional performance properties. Rhone's signature technical fabrics stretch in every direction, breathe, fight odor and the elements, and effortlessly work everywhere so you can stay calm and collected even when life takes unexpected turns. It's time for unparalleled confidence without all of the hassle. Each piece in Rhone's commuter collection is made to coordinate and layer for an instantly elevated look. The collection also features wrinkle release technology and is 100% machine washable. Looking good is that easy. Treated with Gold Fusion anti-odor technology. For more wears between washes, you'll be free and clean all day long. I will say this, Rhone, it's amazing for traveling in particular. They don't even list this, but like that is the best, one of the best usages for Rhone. You can use it every day because it's comfortable in a way that's like workwear. But it looks fancy and you look professional. But if you're traveling, things get wrinkled so easily, especially with how these airlines try to screw you and make you pay for your bags. If you want to just have a carry-on or whatever, or you're traveling, you have limited space, Rhone is perfect for that because you don't have to worry about ironing. It has that incredible wrinkle release technology. Changing seasons is the optimal time for new beginnings. The Commuter Collection's premium look and adaptable design is the best way to move through fall. The Commuter Collection can get you through any workday and straight into whatever comes next. Head to Rhone.com/Majority Report and use promo code Majority Report, one word, to save 20% off your entire order. That's 20% off your entire order when you head to Rhone, RHONE.com/Majority Report and use code Majority Report, one word. It's time to embody your most confident self. And now, time for the show.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
And I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Wednesday, December 11th, 2024. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live, steps, from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Cole Stangler joins us again to talk about the collapse of the French government. And later, Katie Day will be with us to talk about how society failed Jordan Neely, the unhoused person who was killed on the subway by Daniel Penny. Also on the program, Israel bombs Syria nearly 500 times and invades its sovereign territory in an obvious land grab. The UN says food going to northern Gaza has been blocked by Israel for the past 66 days as the IDF keeps slaughtering entire families with airstrikes. Syria's new interim leader has been announced with the backing of the opposition fighters that toppled Assad. Here in the US, the alleged health insurance CEO killer, Luigi Mangione, his manifesto reveals he was motivated by a parasitic, in his words, healthcare system. His posts on Reddit reveal he was dealing with debilitating back pain, as has been rumored. So-called moderate Senate Republicans begin caving to Trump on his cabinet picks. What do you know? Trump taps Republican lawyer Andrew Ferguson to head the FTC. So much for J.D. Vance supposedly being a big fan of Lena Khan. She's out. Right-wing populism for you. But better news, at least in terms of what she's done, Khan. A federal judge in Washington state just sided with her and the FTC, blocking a potentially devastating Kroger's-Albertson merger. Despite Don Jr. being seen with a new younger lady friend, his dad picks ex-girlfriend, Kimberly Guilfoyle. Guilfoyle?
The very competent Kimberly Guilfoyle.
For Greece's ambassador, so you know it's gonna be snowing in Mykonos. What? Do the climate change. I don't know what you're implying. FIFA named Saudi Arabia to host the 2034 World Cup. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the corruption issues are not solved in FIFA. And lastly, conservative Zionist Democrat Josh Gottheimer caught faking his Spotify Wrapped.
This is fraud. It's not a joke, Emma.
To feature more Bruce Springsteen ahead of his run for governor of New Jersey.
High crimes and misdemeanors.
All this and more on today's Majority Report. That is the most wonderful New Jersey story I've ever come across. By the way, it's Hump Day. I'm contractually obligated to say it. Hope everybody is doing well. Matt, Bradley?
Doing pretty good, yeah, actually. Had a nice workout yesterday.
Nice, yes.
Ideologically and on the basketball court, and I'm ready to go today.
Ideological workout sounds a little bit too close to something that Dave Rubin would say.
Hey, maybe Dave Rubin was right.
Sounds like a lot of people seem to think that Dave Rubin might have been right. We'll get to that maybe later. But we actually have real news to cover here. So after Assad's government collapsed, the Israeli government said, hey, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to seize more territory. They already illegally occupy the Golan Heights, which is Syrian territory. They have been for decades.
You could call it Lebensraum.
You could call it that. You can also call what's happening in northern Gaza a Holocaust at this moment.
I certainly would.
They have, as I headlined earlier, the United Nations has said that no food has gone into northern Gaza for 66 days. We don't really have too much footage coming out of there. It's difficult to discern. All we can hear are the horror stories and tweets like saying that they're being pummeled with airstrikes. Please don't forget about us. That's all I see. But in terms of footage, I mean, Israel had set a record for assassinating journalists and media workers, and this is why. Because they wanted to reach this stage of the genocide under the cloak of darkness. And so they're attempting to make the entire north uninhabitable so that they can ethnically cleanse and do what I remember Jared Kushner said earlier this year.
Let's get some resorts, and maybe if they're
condos,
well behaved, they can come back to where they used to live and serve people cocktails.
So That is exactly their vision, by the way.
No, literally.
Trump's gonna try to put a golf course on the Gaza Strip.
Don't pay attention to liberal Zionists. They have their job is just to throw sand in your eyes. The actual people running the show are the Greater Israel sort of far right folks, like from Likud to the right, to farther right.
Which is obvious now, given even more so. It should have been obvious from I don't know, for decades if you've been paying attention to this, but with Netanyahu going to the United Nations and showing a map of Greater Israel that includes Judea and Samaria, aka the West Bank, in the territory that it counts, and the Gaza Strip.
That's what the new ambassador to Israel, or incoming ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, calls it.
I mean, so does Bill Clinton, so this is bipartisan.
Exactly.
Yeah.
True, yeah.
It is like, this is when I realize, like, I do have still some naivete I need to get out of my system, because I just really did think that there would be some semblance of shamelessness at this point, when we all know Amnesty International which is a very mainstream human rights organization in this country, has said it's very plausible Israel is committing genocide. So at a certain level, you just see how people don't really care. But in terms of Israel trying to cement Greater Israel, here is the BBC's Tom Bateman at one of these press conferences where Matt Miller, the ghoul from the State Department, is peppered with questions where he lies repeatedly. So here's Bateman asking him about Israel's incursion into Syria.
With regards to the disengagement zone, I know there's some confusion about whether or not the Israelis have gone even beyond the buffer zone, the disengagement zone, further into Syria. But I mean, there's a chorus of disapproval of this. I mean, the UNDOF, the Secretary General's spokesman has told them to stop. UNDOF informed them ahead of time it would be a violation of the 1974 agreement. You now have Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, all critical allies for you in terms of getting on board the vision that you are trying to lay out for the future of Syria, who have all said this is an attack on Syria's sovereignty, a dangerous development. I mean, what's your position on Israel having invaded that buffer zone?
So I spoke to this yesterday. Nothing has changed since then. What precipitated their move into the buffer zone was the withdrawal of the Syrian armed forces, which, as I said yesterday, creates potentially a vacuum that could be filled by any one of the numerous terrorist organizations that continue to operate inside Syria that have sworn to the destruction of the state of Israel. Israel has said that they deployed their forces into the buffer zone temporarily to prevent such a threat from emerging against the state of Israel and against Israeli civilians. Ultimately, we want to see the 1974 agreement upheld.
I mean, do you not worry this just further erodes the importance and value of international law?
I think it's important that the step that they have taken has remained temporary.
Okay, and I mean, on those the Golan Heights, so the occupied Golan Heights is absolutely littered with the remnants of Syrian villages, of homes from 1967 and demolitions that took place. I mean, many, many thousands of people were expelled or forced to flee. Many of those people will be looking at, what's going on now. You talk about a Syrian process, a Syrian-led future for the people of Syria. I mean, those people had homes and villages back in the occupied Golan Heights. What should they be thinking now? What's the US saying to them?
So I think, Tom, with any number of questions about where things might go in the future, we need to step back and realize that we are 2.5 days since the fall of the regime. And before we start making grand pronouncements about how things are going to proceed in the future, it's important to remember that we are in early days. We are just beginning to have conversations with partners in the region about the path forward and trying to get partners to align around principles that we think are
So
important.
let the bombs fly, Israel.
Yep.
Early days.
All right, we'll give him a second more. I want to just see if there's any more BS for us to debunk.
And we have not yet seen the Syrian people have the ability to make their voices heard. So before we start to get into too far down the road, I think it's important to let the process play out a little bit further.
I just say that, I mean, you talk about pronouncements, but they will say you've already made a pronouncement about the occupied Golan Heights because you've said you recognize Israel's presence there.
This is an action that was taken by the government of the United States years ago with respect to anything over the last few days. I think it's important to let the dust settle a little bit. Yeah.
While the facts on the ground get established.
So it's interesting that he says he wants to return to the 1974 agreement. I think that's the one that he outlined there. You actually don't, because the administration could have taken that action and reversed what Donald Trump did when he was in office, which is that he recognized formally, and he bragged about this as a gift to his Zionist megadonor, Miriam Adelson. He recognized the illegally occupied Golan Heights, the territory that is legally Syria's, but Israel has been occupying for decades, as a part of Israel, which is not true. International law is quite clear on this front. They could have reversed that decision, but they chose not to. So how real is your desire to actually recognize the 1974 agreement, which, basically was a peace agreement between the two parties, but Israel is now even beyond the bounds of how that was currently manifesting itself, right? Even in its illegality with their occupation, they're going past the boundary to create a new buffer zone.
More expansion. So
the Golan Heights was apparently a buffer zone between us and the hordes of terrorists over there. And now we need more of a buffer zone. Why? Even though apparently the Assad regime has been toppled. The Assad government, which was allied now more loosely than we anticipated towards the end, but with Iran, the axis of evil that Israel's so worried about, he's gone. So when he's gone, he was supposedly the threat to you. You're then going to take more territory? No. We know what this is. It is a land grab. It is a colonization in the modern sense. And frankly, I am so sick of hearing these ghouls speak in this manner, because you would never hear this about Ukraine. Ukraine's territorial sovereignty needs to be protected. Their integrity and the boundaries of their state need to be protected. It's an outrage that Russia would not respect the territorial integrity of Ukraine. But just like with Lebanon and just like with Syria, if Israel goes and does a military operation within their state boundaries or takes territory as they're doing in Syria right now, I don't really care too much about sovereignty and territorial integrity.
Here's just a bit from Avi Shlaim piece in The Guardian in 2004. Avi Shlaim, one of the great Israeli historians, was born in Baghdad, moved to Israel, served in the IDF, was a two-state solution guy until I think the past decades shown that it's a one-state democratic solution is the only way forward. But he writes this: by signing the Oslo Accords in 1993, the Palestinians opted for a historic compromise for the peace of the brave. More than 10 years on, again, this was written in 2004, they confront an Israeli leader who rejects the Oslo Accords and is determined to impose on them the peace of the bully. The conflict that is unfolding in the Holy Land today is a conflict of biblical proportions. Goes on to write, the essence of Zionism is territorial expansion, and its principal method is creating facts on the ground by means of Jewish settlement on the land. Shown as a leading land grabber and chief architect of Likud's policy of building Jewish settlements on Arab land. This is what Israel has been under Likud, which is the place that we can have living standards rising for people is if you are helping us settle land that we want to take. And that's what they're doing. It's as simple as that. It's not about security unless you define security as cheap houses for Israelis. Then it is about security.
All right, folks, quick break. And when we come back from a word from our sponsors, we'll be talking to Cole Stangler about what's happening in France.
Hey, a couple of years ago, Nutrafol wanted to advertise on this program, and they sent us a couple of bottles, and I asked if anybody around the office wanted to take it. I didn't feel at the time I needed to, so we didn't. And ultimately, though, a couple of years later, I'm starting to feel like I'm thinning a little bit here, and so I started taking it, and it was great. Really changed the health of my hair, and started getting a little bit more growth. Emma and I both know of women too who particularly, just as so happens, women who had a really good experience with Nutrafol. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement brand. It is trusted by over 1 million people. You can see thicker, stronger, faster growing hair with less shedding in just 3 to 6 months with Nutrafol. And to be clear, thinning hair different between men and women. So a one-size-fits-all approach to hair growth doesn't cut it. Nutrafol has multiple formulas for men and for women that are tailored to the different life stages, such as postpartum or menopause, lifestyle factors, such as a plant-based lifestyle, et cetera, so you can get just what you need. It's physician-formulated, 100% drug-free ingredients. Nutrafol supports healthy hair growth from within by targeting key root causes of thinning. Stuff like stress, stuff like hormones, stuff like aging, nutrition, lifestyle, and metabolism through whole body health. And here's the thing about Nutrafol. A lot of supplements will test each ingredient or will rely on ingredient tests only. Like this helps for that and this helps for that. What Nutrafol does is they actually test the actual final mix, their formulations, to test their efficacy. And in a clinical study, 72% of men saw more scalp coverage after taking Nutrafol Men Hair Growth Supplement for 6 months, and 86% of women saw improved hair growth after taking Nutrafol Women Hair Growth Supplement for 6 months. With the Nutrafol subscription, building a healthy and growing hair routine is simple. Purchase online, no prescription required, automated deliveries, free shipping, keep you on track. Plus, you can save up to 20%. You'll have access to free naturopathic doctor consults, and Headspace membership is included with a subscription. The cold, dry air of winter can be unforgiving, but your hair doesn't have to suffer. For a limited time, Nutrafol offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com and enter the promo code TMR. Find out why over 4,500 healthcare professionals and stylists recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. Nutrafol.com, spelled Nutrafol.com, promo code TMR. That's Nutrafol.com, promo code TMR. Hey, isn't it funny that how the people we love most are often the hardest people to buy a gift for? Well, luckily, there's one gift that everybody on your list is going to absolutely love, and that's an Aura digital picture frame. It was named #1 by Wirecutter. Aura frames make it incredibly easy to share an unlimited number of photos and videos directly from your phone right to a frame in your loved one's house. And when you give an Aura frame as a gift, you can literally personalize it and preload it with a thoughtful message and photos using the Aura app without taking the thing out of the box. It makes it an ideal present for long-distance loved ones. Literally, you do it online. It sends that to them, and you can sit there and preload all that stuff on there, even down to like their Wi-Fi stuff if they are not so technically adept. This is really, honestly, a great gift. It's great for your parents. It's great for your kids, cousins, friends. And the Aura frames are all really beautiful. They don't look, there are some digital picture frames out there that are a little bit dicey. These look great. The images are fantastic. They rotate through. You have full control of it from a distance. Save on the perfect gift by visiting Aura Frames to get $35 off of Aura's best-selling Carver matte frames by using promo code MAJORITY at checkout. That's AURA frames.com, promo code MAJORITY. This deal is exclusive to listeners here, so get yours now in time for the holidays. Terms and conditions apply. We'll put the link in the podcast and YouTube descriptions. And now, time for the show.
We are back, and we would like to welcome back to the show Cole Stangler, journalist covering politics and labor in France. His most recent book is titled Paris is Not Dead, Surviving Hypergentrification in the City of Light. Cole, thanks so much for coming back on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
So since I think we last spoke, we were talking about the fact that Macron had basically refused to name a new prime minister in an effort to kind of squash the left, despite the fact that he had called for elections. The leftist coalition had won the most seats out of the centrist bloc and then the far right Marine Le Pen bloc. And we were hopeful at the time, like when the results came back, hey, this is a left liberal coalition to beat back the fascists. Perhaps we could do that in the United States. Well, turns out both of those pictures ended up not being as rosy as we anticipated.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, I think, I guess to kind of walk you through the timeline here. So when we spoke, that was after these snap elections that Macron called. He has the power to dissolve the National Assembly under the French Constitution, which gives the president a lot of authority. So we had those elections. And like you said, the left had a slight plurality, the left bloc. Macron ultimately decided not to name, as you said, a prime minister that would have represented the left. So one of the names that was floated was Lucie Castet, who's a civil servant, who was the name that all the parties in that left alliance, the New Popular Front, had lined up behind: the Communists, the Socialists, the Greens, La France Insoumise. France Unbowed sometimes is the English translation, although I don't quite like the translation. Anyways, so they all lined up behind Castet. And instead of naming Lucie Castet, what happened is Macron decided to name a prime minister from a party that had achieved the worst score in the legislative elections, which is the kind of moribund, quote unquote, mainstream right-wing party, which has now been overtaken by the far right. So the party called Les Républicains, the party of Nicolas Sarkozy, the kind of historic right-wing conservative party in France. So a very old prime minister, Michel Barnier, who had started his career in the 70s as a politician. Barnier, a conservative prime minister, despite the fact that French voters clearly expressed at the polls their opposition to the right and to the far right. So we had Barnier named as the prime minister, effectively making the far right national rally the kind of kingmaker. Once Barnier was named prime minister earlier this year, the left was already lined up in opposition. And the question was, the thinking was we could find Barnier perhaps Barnier can ultimately win the support of the far right national rally. And we kind of played this game for a few months where the far right was kind of in the driver's seat of French politics, saying, we'd like you to take some strong measures on immigration. We don't want you to go too far on budget cuts, and basically dictating the terms of the agenda, because the government at that point, Barnier knew that he needed the far right to not vote for a motion of no confidence. So we played this kind of game that I think, to get back to the elections was sickening to a lot of people, because a lot of French voters thought, well, wait a second, we just voted in these elections that you made us, weren't expecting. You made us go out to the polls. We said we didn't want the far right, and now the far right is the de facto kind of kingmaker. It seemed really kind of perverse and not reflective of what French voters expressed. And so we kind of had this game going for a few months, and Barnier was tasked with basically delivering a budget. France is under a tremendous amount of pressure from the European Union, from investors, to show that it's going to make some budget cuts to bring its public spending in check, and we can kind of get into that maybe at some point if you'd want. But in any case, Barnier had this one task of basically getting the budget across the finish line. And what happened in really the last few weeks is the far right national rally ultimately pulled the rug out from Barnier. Perhaps politically, we could talk about why they did that, but maybe politically understood it was not too savvy to be associated with a government that was making these budget cuts. So the Barnier government was lost a motion of no confidence in the National Assembly, the first time that's happened since 1962. And now we're in a period in which we're back to that kind of waiting game. The last time we spoke in the summer of who is Macron going to name as the prime minister, and the dynamics have not changed at all in terms of the representation in parliament. We still have the left, that's a slight plurality. We still have the centrist bloc, and we still have the far right. So nothing has changed, and now we're kind of back to square one after months of what I just described.
Barnier and his history of being a part of the traditional conservative party within France, is the national right, the far right party that's overtaken them, is their opposition to him kind of aesthetic to maintain a bit of a populist veneer? Because with Macron appointing him, like, this is this neoliberal center, it appears to me, that is being widely rejected. It was rejected here in this country. I'm drawing some parallels. I know it's obviously not entirely analogous, but given Macron's horrible approval ratings, like, there was no benefit for the far right in allying with him unless they got the austerity that they wanted. But that would have been quite difficult with the most the highest number of concentration of seats being the leftist coalition.
Yeah, I mean, I like doing parallels all the time with American politics. So, if we want to, start making those parallels, I mean, I think, one thing about the National Rally, what you have to keep in mind when trying to understand the choices it's making is that, it's a complex electoral coalition, not unlike the Republican Party in the US. The National Rally has this historic base of low-income, working-class voters from deindustrialized parts of France. That base is real, and the National Rally understands that it needs to keep their support. You also have in France a very kind of different relationship to the state, where people look to the state as a kind of provider of basic services. There are, even the people on the far right who vote for the far right, the working class base believes that the state should provide some amount of services. Now, they don't think it should apply to immigrants, and that's kind of the big difference. And in particular, certain types of immigrants, of course. But there is that working class base that relies on public services, that looks to the state to sort of deliver what it's supposed to the French public. At the same time, the National Rally has this, as they're becoming more and more powerful, they've kind of won over this more middle class, upper class conservative electorate that used to vote for Michel Barnier's party. Look at, for instance, the election results in very wealthy parts of Paris in the legislative elections. You'll find that the National Rally actually gets support from wealthier parts of the country. And these people are, of course, less interested in public services, making sure that the state is going to provide quality healthcare, education. They're more interested in the anti-immigrant rhetoric, the kind of conservative social values that in some ways Barnier has represented in the past. Barnier has been very critical of immigration to France. Many people in his party were opposed to same-sex marriage when it was first rolled out in France. And so the National Rally, this is a long way of saying it's a very complex electoral coalition, and they're trying to kind of juggle these two parts of it. And maybe, it in some ways not dissimilar from the Republicans.
It's really not. I mean, what you're describing, and again, not to draw too many parallels, but it's hard to avoid because I do think that the global right is more organized. And I think that this is the Orban style, whatever, anti-immigrant politics appears to have basically been, through Steve Bannon and others here domestically, something that they were actively trying to foster. And this is now the Republican coalition, very similar as you described, working class people in many ways, but also for the people that stormed the Capitol were upper middle class, small business owners from the middle of the country that really do make up that base. So it's a fascinating comparison. But in the case of France here, the leftist coalition, I saw that you wrote this, that the New Popular Front is fraying as well. Can you explain why that is, given the fact that in theory they should have more power because they have the plurality of seats, and because without those voters, the far right, there's a good chance they would have won in these snap elections. It was strategic by the voters in certain circumstances to vote for a centrist or to vote for a leftist, and centrist and leftist voters kind of worked together to make sure that the National Rally came in third place. So they should have the power. They have the most seats, but why don't they?
Yeah, I mean, I wish we could have a MP from one of the parties on, because it's a very good question, and it depends on really who you talk to in the coalition. They're going to give you different answers, but I'll try to do a kind of overview. It's very telling that if you remember back in the summer when we spoke, there was a lot of momentum behind Lucie Castet, who was the kind of candidate everyone was rallying behind. what's very telling is this time around, when the government was voted down, when they had the motion no confidence, you did not see those similar kind of unified calls behind Lucie Castet. It was this. There was just a lack of even making that proposal very clear. And so why is this coalition sort of fraying? I think we could spend a long time talking about this, but I think part of it is from the onset, it's been there have been tensions. It's even remarkable that this coalition existed in the first place. You have, like I said, so there's four parties: La France Insoumise on kind of the more left side of the spectrum. You have the Greens, the Communists, and then on the other more center part of the spectrum would be the Socialist Party, which is one of the historic kind of governing parties in France. Most recently had François Hollande elected as president. The Socialist Party is much more centrist, interested in winning over moderate voters and governing and taking power. And there's elements of the Socialist Party that have always been extremely hostile to the idea of an alliance with Jean-Luc Mélenchon. It was that this alliance was sort of forced upon them because their own electoral survival depended on it. But there's always been elements very hostile to La France Insoumise. And so the idea of being associated with Mélenchon has always upset a significant chunk of the Socialist Party. Not everyone, but a big chunk of it. And then on the other side, La France Insoumise, you have people who are very hostile towards the Socialist Party in particular, but also increasingly interested in, I wouldn't hesitate to say, in preparing the ground for Jean-Luc Mélenchon's presidential campaign, the head of La France Insoumise. It's sort of an open secret. If anyone tells you the straight face is not true, they're not telling the truth. Mélenchon is preparing his presidential campaign, and so that means that in the LFI orbit, La France Insoumise orbit, they're less interested, I think, in having the left govern and potentially have to make compromises with the center. And they're more interested in, and again, we can debate whether that's the right strategy or not, but they're more interested in having Jean-Luc Mélenchon prepare his presidential campaign. And that's why that instead of calling on supporting Lucie Castet and supporting the left-wing prime minister, LFI, La France Insoumise, is calling for Macron to resign, to step down immediately, and to have presidential elections. They've been saying this privately for some time. Now they're making the case public. And so, you have different strategies and different ideological tendencies. And I think that's, to sum up the problem here. So tension on the left side of the spectrum, also from the Socialist Party in the center.
And Macron himself, we touched on this briefly, but the fact that his approval ratings are so low and he's refusing to resign is notable. His term is up in 2027. Can you talk a little bit about his unpopularity and why, say, Mélenchon might feel like this is an opportunity for him and for perhaps leftists to seize more power? Like, is it more beneficial for them basically to kind of allow this lack of governance to go on and almost this dysfunction in the short term, because at the end it falls at the feet of Macron?
Yeah, I mean that's the calculation that I think a lot of people in La France Insoumise kind of world are making, is that it's not really in their interest to be part of this kind of political mess right now and have to be in a government that's potentially relying on some support from the center beneath this extremely unpopular, isolated president. And there's also been a lot of criticism of the other left-wing parties for actually meeting with Macron. LFI did not take part in those meetings, and that's very emblematic of kind of this difference. Macron is extremely unpopular. If you look at the polls right now, he's at his lowest approval rating since the Yellow Vest movement in late 2018. That huge mass protest over the cost of living triggered by the proposed hike in the fuel tax. So around, if I'm not mistaken, 20%, 25%, which are extremely low. Again, if you think about it in the American context, that's below what the current president approval ratings are in the US by quite a significant measure. He's someone who's increasingly isolated too. There's been reports in the French press about how just isolated he is with his team of advisors. And what's frustrating the most to Macron is that he's no longer kind of at the center of the political conversation. Although now he is, now that the government, he needs to name a new prime minister. But under the French constitution, it's the prime minister and the government that's accountable to the National Assembly that sets policy. It's not the president. So Macron's in this weird stage of his presidency where this big gamble that he took on the snap elections clearly failed. He's extremely unpopular. People hold him responsible for the crisis. And I think for good reason. This was his decision to make, and it completely backfired. So there's a lot of opposition to Macron. You know, if you talk to someone from La France Insoumise, they would tell you that Mélenchon has a chance to become president. The problem is, if you look at Mélenchon's approval ratings, and I'm not someone who likes to obsess too much over the polls, but they're extremely, extremely negative. He's one of the most unpopular politicians in France today, close, more unpopular than Marine Le Pen, on par with Éric Zemmour. And that's not to say that left-wing ideas or that the actual policy agenda behind him are unpopular. I don't think they are. There's lots of evidence, I think, to the contrary. But if we're going to talk specifically about the figure of Mélenchon, he's someone who, is extremely not just polarizing but unpopular. And again, that's not a criticism at all of the ideas, the platform. But that's kind of where we're at today, and there may be other people that could kind of
right.
step up.
Why is this for him, despite those numbers, more of like an ego thing? Is it the fact that he's done it before and ran before? I mean, it's interesting because like we didn't even mention the fact that Marine Le Pen has embezzlement charges being levied against her, the leader of the far right. So in theory, that would make her a vulnerable candidate for president, but not to again draw a million parallels, we've also seen that criminal indictments or issues in the courts hasn't affected right-wing candidates in the West recently.
Yeah, although the interesting thing about, that's a very good point, but the thing about Le Pen's case is that she could actually be barred from running for office and from serving under the French system. And so there's that very important court decision is coming up in March 2025. And so that's also perhaps why the National Rally is one of the reasons why people think the National Rally is so optimistic about the idea of moving into presidential elections. Because if Le Pen is going to be ineligible soon, you might as well roll the dice and go for elections now. Maybe hope Macron resigns, but again, that seems very unlikely.
Right. Well, Cole, I really appreciate your time today and keeping us updated on this. Thanks for always giving us all of the information from over there in France. Cole Stangler, you can read his most recent book, Paris is Not Dead, Surviving Hypergentrification in the City of Light, and then just follow him on social media, and you can get all your updates, English language updates as well, for people who may not speak or understand French.
You on Blue Sky, Cole?
Yeah.
I am. I just made a Blue Sky.
There you go.
It's actually kind of nice over there. I mean,
and it pushes traffic.
Right. Right.
Which is what we care about in this business.
It doesn't block the links to maybe your articles or whatever, like the X platform does. All right. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Cole.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me, Emma.
For sure. All right, folks, a quick break. When we come back, we are going to be speaking with Katie Way. I'm sorry, I said Day earlier. Katie Way.
Not Megan Day.
No. About the Jordan Neely case. She's been reporting on it here in New York, what it means more broadly in our society, and more. We'll be right back. We are back, and we are joined now by Katie Way, writer and editor at Hellgate, who covers issues here in New York City, including Katie was just at the closing arguments in the Daniel Penny trial for killing Jordan Neely. Katie, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
So, as I just mentioned, you were present at the closing arguments. Obviously, we do know that he was not convicted, Daniel Penny. He just recorded an interview with Jeanine Pirro for Fox News that I'm sure will enrage us all, but he's off, and no justice really for Jordan Neely. But what did you observe when you were in the courtroom, some of those closing arguments, and how those arguments were made?
Sure. Yeah. So the closing arguments, that's effectively just going over, both on the prosecution and the defense side, the evidence that they sort of most want the jury to consider. You know, the trial went on over the course of a month or so. So that's a ton of witnesses, a ton of evidence, both like medical evidence. There's testimony from Daniel Penny's instructor in the Marine Corps and martial arts. There are people talking about the kind of person Daniel Penny is. So, you know, it's a lot to consider. And this was the moment for the prosecution and defense to bring their respective arguments home. And so what we saw from the prosecution was a lot of medical evidence, specifically pointing to death by, as the ME ruled, asphyxiation chokehold. So that's stuff like blood clotting in like autopsy photos of blood clots underneath Jordan Neely's eyelids and in the like musculature of his neck. Stills from videos that people took of the two of them on the ground, where you can see the color changing in Jordan Neely's face, you know, like really graphic stuff like that. And then the other thing that the prosecution really highlighted was Penny's behavior, both in the immediate aftermath of their altercation and in a interview with the police, where he did not know that Jordan Neely was dead, but he also did not ask how Jordan Neely was. This man, he just spent 6 minutes choking on the floor of the F train. You know, he did not express any remorse for what he had to do. He called Jordan Neely a crackhead multiple times, I think 5 different times during the interview. So that was what the prosecution kind of put in front of the jury. And then on the defense side of the equation, there were arguments that it was not actually a chokehold, that that's not what killed Jordan Neely at all, that it was a combination of sickle cell trait that's present in 8 to 10% of the African American population, psychosis, you know, caused by schizophrenia, and drug use, K2. And that is, I did another interview yesterday, and the interviewer pointed out that's something that, you know, the cops have used similar reasoning, specifically with that sickle cell trait, saying that
yes,
like, this person who died in our custody, just crazy coincidence, you know.
Which we all know that, you know, there's been some research into sickle cell, and it's not entirely clear, but it's not based on the color of one's skin, most likely. It's likely based on proximity to countries that may have had malaria, which could have contributed to it. But usually, as you're saying, it's used in a racialized way. And when it comes to the other defenses that you mentioned, I'm reminded of how those were unsuccessful in the trial of the killer of George Floyd, was the fact that he had used drugs or the fact that he was in poor health. In both of those instances, it's on video, the person's neck being constrained. So I'm confused as to why there were different outcomes here, even though obviously Penny is not a police officer. It doesn't necessarily matter if the person is in poor health or is more susceptible to dying because of pressure on their neck. In my view, obviously, at issue is the pressure on the neck.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I think, you know, in order to discount, like you said, video, and this is video that even in only my 2 days in court, we watched numerous times. You know, we watched Jordan Neely die over and over. just in those 2 days in that courtroom. So I can only imagine how many times the jury saw it. I think that actually was probably the most, I have no insider information about this, but effective part of the defense's argument, which is that, it's very important in order to find Daniel Penny not innocent of a crime that you don't identify with Jordan Neely, that you identify with Daniel Penny, that you agree with the idea that Daniel Penny is a hero, and that you identify with the people who were on the train at the same time as both of them, who did, testify in court that they were scared that Jordan Neely was making threats and that they were afraid that he was going to, hurt someone. That's something that, like you mentioned, Daniel Penny reiterated in the, clip of the Fox News interview that's going around today, that he wouldn't have been able to live with himself if Jordan Neely had hurt someone on the train. And, it's like, well, you did.
I'm so glad no one got hurt that day.
I know. See, exactly.
Yeah. It's crazy because you just see the dehumanization in real time. Because you know who was hurt that day? In fact, hurt in a fatal manner? The person who died, Jordan Neely. And you mentioned it briefly. It's in your piece in Hellgate, which I'd really encourage people to read, where you spoke. The defense seemed to be explicit about the politicization of what the defense was explicit in their claims that this prosecution was political in many ways, or you talked about how they verged into kind of like conspiracism about some of the evidence here. Can you give the audience some examples of what you heard from the defense on that front?
Yes. So, oh my God, again, I forgot about that as well. Yes. So the defense tried to argue, I don't even know if I can say tried because it works. They got what they wanted. But the defense argued that witnesses who arrived at the scene after the train had already stopped and cleared off, that they, one man, Eric Gonzalez, who had been holding Jordan Neely's arms, testified that he asked Daniel Penny to let go of his chokehold on Jordan Neely's neck, and that he had it under control. And another man tried to, I think, give Jordan Neely water, but said he was too intimidated by Daniel Penny. And the defense tried to claim that those witnesses were so intimidated by the political pressure exerted by protesters who wanted justice for Jordan Neely that they changed their testimony. They were so scared.
What evidence did they have that they changed their testimony?
Well, one, Eric Gonzalez actually did lie to the cops initially. He was in hiding.
That was the guy.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. So, there's that. But on the other hand, I think a lot can be said about protesting in favor of justice for Jordan Neely. I can't, it just does not really gel with reality that is like such a potent political force in the city that you would lie in court in such a high profile case. I think that is a ridiculous argument. And the defense also argued that the medical examiners was pressured by her boss to put the cause of death as asphyxiation (chokehold), and that the boss had some kind of like political aspirations. I don't know. It felt very like tossed together and incoherent. But again, I don't. Not only am I not a lawyer, but it worked. Right? Exactly. So.
And I'm not sure you're at liberty to say this legally, so correct me if I'm wrong, but like, did you, the makeup of the jury, was that public in terms of like racial or racial identity or age or anything like that? Was there anything that was made clear about that?
Well, I know, it's Manhattan residents, 12 Manhattan residents. I don't, want to talk about individual jurors or anything like that. But I mean, what I will say is that they hired, Daniel Penny's defense team hired the same jury consultant that Kyle Rittenhouse's defense team did. So, I mean, I think that kind of, and you know what, they got their money's worth, it looks like. So,
of course,
yeah.
I definitely didn't want you to do that. I just was curious if any, like, because sometimes they make public, the racial makeup of a jury, but I wasn't entirely clear in this case. But regardless, that says it all. That really does does say it all here. And can you talk a little bit about the reaction that you've seen also in the wake of this, as somebody who covers politics in the city? You had a closing part of your latest piece about how Eric Adams flew off to some fancy retreat after this, and Daniel Penny got a beer, and Jordan Neely is dead. It's a crude summary of your writing. People should check it out, but that really does say it all, does it not? Is that there's a man dead, there's another guy on a media tour getting a beer, and the mayor is off on some luxury trip.
Right, exactly. And that was actually by colleague Max Rivlin-Nadler. So I want to, or maybe it was Chris Robbins. I don't know. We're doing these anonymously. It gets a little confusing.
Sorry.
But no, all good. But yeah, right. Effectively, it is just, it feels like this is something that, especially the mayor, would love to, in a way, move on from, because he got what he wanted, I think, in a lot of ways. And, he's made past statements that, effectively allude to that. A few weeks ago at a press conference, he said that Daniel Penny did what the city should have done. And he clarified, this week, that what he meant by what he said was protect the people, the passengers on the train. It's like, is Jordan Neely not a passenger on the train? He was riding the train. Like the acceptance of the premise that Jordan Neely is a threat that needed to be neutralized, was the threat that needed to be neutralized at, the highest levels of city leadership is insane. Yeah.
And his role in essentially not providing much at all, if at all, care for unhoused people in the city. He's been especially hawkish about undocumented migrants in shelters, and was kicking them out in a short period of time a few months ago at this point. What has Eric Adams done, or what has he not done to contribute to the problem of unhoused people not being able to get care or be safe in any real way?
Yeah, I mean, I think Eric Adams has done, what he's done with a lot of problems in the city, and what he sort of explicitly promised from the jump he was going to do. He's thrown cops at the situation. I mean, throwing cops at the subways. Like, this is, I think he's made his orientation very clear that instead of funding, shelters or other resources for homeless New Yorkers, instead of, creating these like robust programs that can, get people stable, he is funding, he wants to sweep the problem away. Like, people shouldn't be living on the subways. People shouldn't be, sleeping on the trains. It's like, people should not be creating disorder effectively. And it's like, I don't think there are too many people who are like, I'm loving this. This is an amazing situation. This is what I would pick to do.
Yes.
Right. Yes, exactly. So, yeah.
Right. It's a problem. And I do think that at least in the city, the Democratic representation in both with Kathy Hochul, who is deeply unpopular, and Eric Adams, who is under indictment and deeply unpopular. These centrist Democrats, I would argue that Eric Adams is pretty right wing. They, I think, have contributed to a mass frustration, really, with Democrats in these safe blue states, because it's so ossified. The institutionally, the Democrats there, that they don't behave in a way that Democrats would if they had, say, like a robust Republican opposition that may cause them to actually deliver for people.
Right, exactly. And you can feel that. You see that walking around, every day in the city. Like, if you want to talk about the scary New York City experience, like the scary New York City experience is that you can walk around and see immiseration. Like, you can see people suffering. Like, I'm not afraid, that I'm seeing someone sleeping on the train, I feel sad that that's like the situation that they have to be in,
Agreed on that front. Well, really appreciate your time today, Katie Way. You can read Hellgate for all of this and other updates on the city. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
All right. With that, we're going to wrap up the free part of this program and head into the fun part of the program. I'm not sure we'll take your calls today. I think we'll just do no calls today because I may leave a little early. I have an early bird special dinner to go to. We have I will say we have a Christmas tradition dinner, but the dinner starts at 5 and it's not that close. So older people having dinner at 5, I don't know what to say. I love my family, but that's a lot. Anyway, so I'm going to maybe duck out around 10 minutes early. But with that said, check out ESPN. We went over week 14 in the NFL, all of the developments there. We also talked a little bit about the Juan Soto contract, and we will be back tomorrow with our picks against the spread. Matt, what is happening on Left Reckoning?
Yeah, we had Danny Bessner on talking about, are we at a world war? What's going on in Syria, what Trump's foreign policy is. Also, Ashik Sadiq, national co-chair of DSA, talking about what DSA is and how it's prepared to expand and grow in 2025. So interesting conversation there. Patreon.com/Left Reckoning.
And we have merch. This is important stuff here, folks. Merch for the holidays. Special edition for at least the M-Majority Report hats. Limited edition M-Majority Report in charcoal. Loving that contrast. It's looking great. I'm excited to get mine. You, if you would like, can get yours at shop.majorityreportradio.com, where you can also get the 20th anniversary mugs that are back in stock for pre-order. Limited edition pre-order. These are the slickest mugs. My favorite.
It's slick in that Sam gets to reuse a 20-year-old logo.
Yes.
The mug and make merchandise on it.
I mean, slick in the business sense. He doesn't have to.
It's called efficiency.
Yeah. It's called vintage. All right. So check it out. Shop.majorityreportradio.com. And I think that's that. Oh, one more. I think people may have seen this already, but I just want to remind people. This young girl, Bana Jibril, made this beautiful painting of me. It's so sweet. And she is in Egypt now, displaced from Gaza. Thankfully, she and her family are okay. At least outside of Gaza, but they're struggling because they lost everything. You can read their explanation below. But they need everything that they can to restart in Egypt. So if you have any extra money in the couch cushions, or if you would like to help them out, their GoFundMe is down, linked below. All right, guys. See you in the fun half.
You are in for it. All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Oh, no. Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy. Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflakes says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ Danner.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense.
You see white people doing drugs that look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males,
psych, fuck them. Snowflake says what?
What?
Snowflake says what? lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck 'em. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy.
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We are back, folks, and it is the fun half. Let's do this really quickly because I was very jealous to see that Hassan Piker had Lena Khan on yesterday.
He had Ta-Nehisi Coates, Lena Khan, and Stavros Halkias. I mean, the triumvirate.
It's just, he's just doing it better than all of us, unfortunately. I mean, and he had Rashida Tlaib on, who is a guest that I would love to have on at one point, but I've interviewed her before. She is so lovely, but she's so low-key that I could see her just being very picky and choosy about who she goes on with, and Hassan has been a phenomenal advocate for Palestinians. But anyway, this is all to say is that I'm just like, I'm so bitter at you, Hassan.
Yeah, you're our enemy now.
Yeah. In fact, I'm leaving the left because you had too many great guests on your show. Okay. All right. We're having fun, folks. Here we go. No, I don't care. Lena Khan. We're having a great time. Lena Khan on with Hassan talking about this merger, which was blocked by a judge, thankfully. Krogertsons. It almost was. Kroger Albertsons. It's the fun half.
This decision being blocked, what kind of labor protections does that offer to people that are working at these corporations?
So one thing that our lawsuit alleged was that if this merger goes through, it's going to mean higher grocery prices for shoppers, but it's also going to be worse for the workers. And this is the first time that the FTC has ever sought to block a merger